This is KFCF Fresno, your listener-sponsored radio station. Stay tuned now for Climate Politics with your host, Kevin Hall.
Good afternoon and welcome to Climate Politics, where on the second and fourth Fridays of each month at this time we discuss the political climate of the San Joaquin Valley and its impact on our ability to address climate change. I'm your host, Kevin Hall. On today's show, we'll be speaking with Tom Frantz of the Association of Irritated Residents about the California Air Resources Board meeting happening in Fresno in January. Following Tom, we'll have Mariah Thompson of the National Lawyers Guild about an exciting film and discussion event they are sponsoring next week here in Fresno's Tower District. And then finally, we will have an in-depth conversation with Lemoore City Councilmember Holly Andrade Blair about the political machinations of her city. It's a fascinating story. You won't want to miss it. Also, please bring out your pen and paper because we'd like to give people some action items each broadcast, and there's something for everyone on this week's episode. You're invited to call us at any point during the show if you want to join the conversation. That number is 559-266-8888. I'm saying it in rhythm to the music. You can also call in and have your comment or question written down off the air, and they'll just dance it into us. Our operators are standing by. Just call 559-266-8888. Please stay tuned. We'll be right back. Well, okay, here we go. I'm going to start with an important update, and as I mentioned, I hope you have your pen and paper out. The youth-led Sunrise Movement, which is demanding action on climate change and pushing the Green New Deal, is now sitting with the Indigenous Peoples-led Climate Justice Alliance to ensure that the tenets established by the Alliance are incorporated into Sunrise's plan of action and legislation. This is a very exciting step forward. Both of these important organizations have websites that I'll give to you in a moment, but the big news was also announced last night on a planning call hosted by leaders of the Sunrise Movement. This summer, there's going to be the first presidential debate for the next election, the 2020. They are planning on generating 10,000 protesters outside of it demanding action on climate change. It will be the largest such protest in the history of presidential debates. They don't know the date, of course, yet, or the location, because neither party has announced it, but that doesn't change the action plan, which is going to begin with a tour in March and building and training up to the big turnout. They have internships available. They're looking for students between middle school and college who want to get engaged directly, and they are having a special planning call for those students this Sunday. I will give you that a little more detail on that in just a moment, but their next step after the summer debate and the issue, the hashtag is change the debate. The underlying problem is that climate change is not being addressed by these candidates. Read through Governor Gavin Newsom's or listen to the coverage of his recent inauguration. It's not being given the priority it needs to be in every conversation. Every politician must be talking about this. So the Sunrise Movement will be seeking every candidate in the 2020 election for whatever office, and well, they're focused on, the House and the Senate in Washington, D.C., but they want every candidate to be asked, do you support the Green New Deal? And it's either yes or no. There's nothing in between. And leading up to, the expectation is then to capture both houses of Congress and the presidency in 2020 and begin introducing Green New Deal legislation in 2021. Those are their goals, and they are determined. We have 12 years left. By then, we're down to 10. Think of global warming as your Vietnam War. And think of the people dying in the war and why people went to protest it. Climate change is that war times 100. And people have to take it seriously and get on a war footing, even if it means protesting the lack of a responsive government, which is what people who lived through the 60s, and I can kind of remember it, that's what they went through, and that's what changed things, and that's what's happening now. These young people are dead serious, and for good reasons. So again, Sunrise is hosting a planning call specifically for young people this Sunday. A quick search online for Sunrise Movement will bring you to their website, which is sunrisemovement.org. You'll know you're there when you see their slogan, "We're building an army of young people to stop climate change and create millions of good jobs in the process." And that Green New Deal's transition off of our carbon economy must be a just one. And the Climate Justice Alliance is the most important coalition in this country working toward that goal. And as mentioned, they are now working with Sunrise Movement to attain it. So look online for Climate Justice Alliance. Their website, climatejusticealliance.org. Their introductory phrase reads, "Climate Justice Alliance is a national alliance advancing just transition strategies in communities across the U.S." Okay, well that's it for now on the updates. On the line we have our first guest of the day, and that is Tom Frantz, a good friend of mine. We go way back. Many of you who read Community Alliance will be familiar with this Clearing the Air column that he's been writing for a number of years after he graciously let me hand it off to him. And he has been the founding person and membership of Association of Irritated Residents, led numerous fights for clean air, too numerous to mention, stretching back more than 2 decades. He's been on this radio station many times before, but it's always a pleasure to have him back. Tom, welcome to Climate Politics.
Thank you, Kevin. Happy to be here.
And we have you here today, Tom, to talk about a big cleanup plan for our dirty, dirty air. And perhaps you would just tell us a bit the name of the plan and who's coming to town and why.
Okay, it's a fine particulate or PM 2.5 cleanup plan. It's 2 years late. It should have been already written and implemented a couple years back. The California Air Resources Board is coming to Fresno on January 24th, 9 in the morning, to look at the plan and probably approve it. The plan has been developed jointly between the Air Resources Board and our local air district over the past year and a half. There's a lot wrong with the plan. They will likely, almost certainly, approve it, but it's probably illegal the way they've done the plan. It's insufficient for reaching the goals. It's dependent on billions of dollars in incentive funding that nobody knows where it's going to come from. It's dependent on new rules being developed, which are promised but not in the plan yet, which is utterly ridiculous because no one knows what they'll be or how many reductions we'll get from those rules. There's all kinds of problems with this plan. The inventory screwed up. The idea of trying to improve air quality in specified locations instead of valley-wide is probably illegal. There's a myriad of problems that need to be addressed, and a lot of advocates are going to go and try and name a lot of these problems in front of CARB and see if they can address them more quickly. We have to move forward on this. We'll see what CARB comes up with on January 24th.
And so, Tom, in terms of just stepping back to where you said 2 years late, this plan, does it address more than one attainment date that we should have achieved by now? Doesn't it incorporate 2 or 3 of them?
Yeah, the plan actually incorporates 3 different standards covering 2 different types of pollution. It's all related to fine particulate matter. We have a 1997 plan that set levels that were actually too high to be truly health protective. Those levels were lowered in 2006 and again in 2012. Mm-hmm. And we have 3 different deadlines. We will miss the first deadline, which is 2020, for what's called the annual standard or the annual average for fine particulates. Mm-hmm. We have till 2006 to meet. We have until 2024 to meet a 2006 standard. We have until 2025 to meet the final 2012 standard. So it's very complicated, but it's really that final standard in 2012.
I'm sorry. It's complicated, Tom, but aren't those other dates still in the plan because we've never attained those goals?
We have not attained even the 1997 goals.
Yeah.
And we've asked for extensions. The 2006 standard, we are assuming a 5-year extension, that's actually we should be meeting that in 2021, or 2019, but we're going to get till 2024 with an extension. But we haven't made any progress. Here's the bottom line.
Yes.
10 years ago, if you look at the levels, we're at the same levels today. The last 2 years are every bit as bad as they were 10 years ago. We've spent about $2 billion in incentives in the last 12 years with almost nothing to show for it.
Yeah.
Now we're going to throw more money that we don't have, $5 billion at the problem, and hope for the best.
And we've been trying that, and $2 billion so far, and another $5 billion unidentified funding. Isn't the solution here regulation?
We need backstops. The Air District is depending on incentives, meaning people have to voluntarily take their money and spend it on cleaner equipment. Nobody knows how that's going to go. I can show you dozens of farmers who've never switched their internal combustion water pumps to electricity, even though there's incentive money for them to do that. Nobody's forcing people to take this money if they think they're better off, not making the change.
Right, and so to the point of regulation, that is what we need in place of incentive voluntary efforts. Definitely,
we need regulation. You can make a regulation that all these tractors and all these trucks have to be changed over by a certain date. And then you can help support that with some funding, but there's got to be a backstop, not just voluntary action.
Right. I mean, it seems to me the goal of incentives should be to, prime the pump with a few years of it and then move into regulation, so it pushes people into the incentive program because they know it's going to end.
Yeah, and agriculture is a big problem. They just absolutely refuse through their lobbyists to take any mandatory program. If you want to throw money at them, they're glad to take it. But nothing mandatory has ever been successfully pushed through regarding agriculture.
This is just a quick reminder. We're speaking with Tom Frantz with the Association of Irritated Residents, and we're talking about the upcoming meeting of the California Air Resources Board on January 24th. It's going to be all day, starting at 9 a.m. In the Grand at 1401 Fulton Street on the 10th floor in the ballroom there. And the vote will be cast on the next particulate matter cleanup plan, the PM 2.5 cleanup plan. It's actually 3 plans in one, many years late. Tom, if the everyday person would like to go down there and say a few words, would you encourage that? And so what sort of message do you think they need to hear?
Well, everybody has their own interests, but the more people that go down there and speak about the need for a stronger plan, something that works faster, something that will work with certainty, meaning we need strong regulations, that would be welcome. I mean, they can talk about the need to ban fireplace burning in the valley. That's badly needed. We can do it by lowering the threshold when people are allowed to burn. You don't have to call it a ban, but we need strong action there. We need strong action on restaurants that cook meat and spew these particulates and soot into the air every day. It would apply to every restaurant equally. It's not an economic issue, really. It's a few cents on every hamburger. We need that.
Yep, and dairies, I suppose, we might consider going after that huge source, right?
Well, that's a big problem with this plan. The latest studies show that in parts of the valley where fine particulates are the worst, that ammonia controls would improve our air quality. Yet the Air District and CARB, the state, has consistently refused because it would mean something mandatory that the dairies have to do. And if it's not voluntary, then there's just no way so far that any of that can get pushed through with the ag lobbyists. A strong public presence can make a difference on that issue as well.
Thank you. That's the end of our time with Tom Frantz with the Association of Irritated Residents. And Tom, thank you very much for the update.
You're welcome, and I'll see you there.
Right on. Okay. There is going to be, again, on January 24th. It's the board meeting of the California Air Resources Board, being held at the Grand at 1401 Fulton Street in the 10th floor ballroom of Fresno. You can look it up if you go to California Air Resources Board and look for the 2019 meeting dates. You'll get the details on their website as well, and descriptions of the agenda, and if one is to speak, how to do it. But it's basically, you get to comment when they're talking about the plan. They open it up for public comment, and you get your 2 or 3 minutes. You're listening to Climate Politics. This is KFCF 88.1 in Fresno. Coming up, we have Mariah Thompson to talk about an exciting film and discussion event. And following that, we'll have Holly Andrade Blair with the Lemoore City Council. Please stay tuned. We'll be back right after this. Thank you. Welcome back to Climate Politics on KFCF. Our second guest today is attorney and advocate Mariah Thompson. Mariah volunteers as co-chair of the Environmental Justice Subcommittee of the National Lawyer Guild's Central Valley chapter. She was also on the show back in August to discuss the county general plan and some mansplaining that County Supervisor Brian Pacheco threw at her from the dais. But Mariah, you're here today to talk about more pleasant things. Welcome to the show. Say hello to everyone and tell us about this exciting event your group is sponsoring.
Well, hello. Happy to be back.
Yep.
Yes, much more happy news this time than the last time that I was on, so I'm happy for that. So the event that I'm here to plug today is a film showing that the National Lawyers Guild Central Valley chapter will be hosting on January 24th. That's a Thursday. It is a free film showing and then a discussion of the film Water and Power, a California Heist. This is a documentary about California water policy, water law, and the history of the big water fights that have taken place throughout California's history, especially in the San Joaquin Valley. And we are going to have some exciting guests there with us that night.
Mariah, I need to interrupt you. I'm sorry. I'm trying to play with the sound quality of the phone that you're using. Perhaps you're...
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Is there any way you could position perhaps are you using a headset? Or
I am using a headset. Is that better?
I think you need to lose the headset or hold it. Yeah, we're getting some echo because the little sound waves in the room bounce back to the microphone a microsecond after your voice hits it.
Oh, interesting. Okay, let me see if I can get off the headset. Hold on.
That's a good idea. Thanks. And we're talking with Mariah Thompson, and we're talking about this upcoming showing of in the Real Justice film series. So I'm going to let Mariah continue. Please tell us more.
Okay, can you hear me better now?
Yes, it's much less hot at this point.
Perfect. Okay, so first, I guess I'll back up and talk about the Real Justice film series.
Great.
So the Real Justice film series is a free film series that the National Lawyers Guild is sponsoring in collaboration with The Review, which is the venue. And it is a monthly showing of a film that intersects the issues of law and social justice. So we are doing our best to highlight documentaries and other films that touch on important social justice issues with the recognition that the law is not actually always a tool for social justice and social change, and it's frequently an institution that can delay social change, and that also needs to be recognized and examined. So we've shown a couple great films so far. This will be our third film. And as I said before, it's called Water and Power, a California Heist. And we will be having some really important guests with us to facilitate a discussion. This is the first time we're having a discussion with the film because we decided that it was probably pretty important to open that up, especially given how important these issues are here in the Valley. So we are going to be having Mark Eriks. He is the journalist that is featured in the film. He's going to be present. We're really lucky to have him. We're very grateful that he's taking the time to come and speak with us. And we will also have Paul Gilmore, who is a professor at City College, and he has a strong background in history and the history of water issues in the Valley. And then I will be present as well. I do environmental justice work, including water work in disadvantaged rural communities in my day job at California Rural Legal Assistance. And so I will be there and available as well to talk about the way this is impacting low-income communities right here in our area.
And this is free of charge to attend?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Oh, come on, Kevin. What do you think we're going to do? Great. And well done getting Mark Eriks into your program. I know he's been working hard on his upcoming book, and I'm sure, and I've seen on Facebook that photographer Joel Pickford has been coordinating with him on some pieces of that. So well done. Mark brings a unique perspective as what I just have to call a hardcore reporter who just has always gone deep on stories, and of course has a series of novels, not novels, I'm sorry, but nonfiction works of deep investigative reporting, including The King of California, of course. And so, but speaking of The King of California and the water heist and the many criminals involved, Water and Power. Why don't you dip into that a little? Oh, bad pun, but Mariah, Water and Power. Go there a little. Tell us how that intersects with your work and why you think this is the important film to have a good discussion around.
Yeah. So I think that people tend to recognize in California right now that we have a housing crisis. For example, it's very well known. Housing issues impact everyone all over California. People don't always realize that we have a water crisis as well, and that water crisis is a result of a lot of things. But much worsened a lot by the drought. But that water crisis disproportionately impacts low-income communities, communities of color, rural communities, and urban communities that are often segregated into areas with poor infrastructure and aging infrastructure and things of that nature. And when I say that we have a water crisis, what I mean is that people are drinking water that is contaminated, that they shouldn't drink, can't drink. They're paying too much for that water that they often can't drink. So they're subsidizing that water with additional purchases out of their discretionary income for bottled water in some cases. We have lead in pipes throughout California, in schools throughout California. We have wells throughout the San Joaquin Valley that are going dry or have gone dry, and all sorts of things, And right here in our area, there's a lot of groups that work on water issues that are dealing with things like water contamination, with chemicals that were either pesticides or byproducts added to pesticides, with arsenic, with nitrates, with uranium, with coliform, with all sorts of things. And these are folks that are, sometimes within water systems and just not attached to them, or they're right outside of water systems. I read a statistic today that something like 67% of residents that can't drink their water in unincorporated areas are within 500 feet of a public water system, but aren't able to connect to it.
Wow. And excuse me, but that is not, isn't that also related to discriminatory land use practices?
Oh, well, yes. All of it is related to discriminatory land use practices, and of course we call that environmental racism.
Yes, people were either redlined into certain parts of cities or counties, or just not allowed into certain towns and cities.
Yes, and especially in Fresno. It's very clear in Fresno. Fresno is kind of famous for this. You can still go online really easily and type in Fresno redlining maps and pull up the maps that show, where in the city was, blocked out for different populations. And in some neighborhoods in Fresno City, if you buy a house, they still have racially restrictive covenants on them, even though they're no longer enforceable. So that, of course, led to situations where certain communities, primarily low-income and minority communities, immigrant communities, non-English speakers, were segregated into rural areas or into industrial areas. And these areas were oftentimes intentionally underdeveloped. There's a famous piece of I think it's a Tulare County General Plan from the 70s that says that there's an intent to not put in infrastructure in some of these rural communities with the hope that it will slowly kill these communities because they were considered, quote, non-viable, and it would drive people out of them, and so then, it would just kill off the communities, which of course didn't happen because communities have, a heritage and a history, and communities endure, but they're still now left without infrastructure and without water that they can drink and things of that nature. So it's really quite a crisis. We see more of a recognition at the state level now that it is a crisis. There are attempts to get funding available for it. We've even seen it recognized by the governor that there's a crisis. So there is that recognition, but on the daily here in the Valley especially, there are so many obstacles for people getting access to clean and affordable drinking water that it sometimes doesn't seem like there's been any progress at all. The fights take forever and there's not enough money, and in the meanwhile, residents have to drink and bathe in and cook with and give to their children water that is oftentimes toxic and causes cancer.
it is a dire situation, and presumably in the discussion next Thursday, January 24th. I'm sorry, that's 2 weeks from now, right?
Yes.
On Thursday, January 24th, that you'll have an action component, perhaps, where people are there and they can get engaged in helping in some way on this fight?
That's a good question. I don't think that we're presenting this with a specific ask. At this point, I think that we're presenting it to engage folks in a discussion. I suspect that a lot of people that will come won't have a lot of knowledge about these issues, and then hopefully some there will and will be able to share their perspectives as well.
That's a great place to start, isn't it?
Yeah. And, there's a lot of movement happening on water stuff right now. We're seeing the rollout of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of reports that have just been coming out this last, month or so from the state about implementation of, of the Affordable Drinking Water Fund, AB 401. A report was just released on the progress made towards achieving the human right to water, and all of these are in public comment period right now. And so there's a lot happening right now, but we don't have a specific, ask or thing we're having people show up for, besides this event. And we can provide additional information about those things at that event, and perhaps at that time we'll have some more asks. But as of right now, we're not pushing this towards a particular organizing campaign.
Sure. Well, we got to agitate first, right?
Well,
I meant to say educate. Did I say the wrong word? We've been speaking with Mariah Thompson, and she is co-chair of the Environmental Justice Subcommittee of the National Lawyer Guild Central Valley Chapter, and she's been telling us all about this great event that's coming up on Thursday, January 24th, from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Review at 620 East Olive Avenue in Fresno. It's a film showing a discussion. The film is Water and Power, a California Heist, with special guest Mark Arax, famous reporter and author, and Fresno City College professor Paul Gilmore, an expert, deep knowledge in the history of water politics. He teaches a class in valley infrastructure for folks who really want to get educated, right, Mariah? Have you heard of that?
Yep.
Well, thank you once again. Thank you for joining us on the show, and thank you for this, very, very helpful event. We appreciate it. We'll be right back after this with our next guest, Holly Andrade Blair, from the Lemoore City Council, to hear what goes on when a progressive Democrat wants to make change in her community and actually gets elected to the City Council. It's a really fascinating tale. Please stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Climate Politics on KFCF 88.1 in Fresno. I'm your host, Kevin Hall. At the controls, we have engineer in training Joey Hall and captive producer Dennis Thompson. I'm grateful for the help. On the line with us next is Holly Andrade Blair. No finer example can be found of a woman fighting for change in her community by getting herself elected to a city council and there running into roadblocks all too familiar to many Valley activists seeking to improve their hometowns than Holly. But this powerful voice is now on the dais, and she's been lighting the lights of transparency in government. We're going to talk with her about what she's finding in those previously dark corners. Holly, you were on our first show back in July, so welcome back. It's so good to have you with us again. Please take a moment to say hi to everyone, and first maybe let us know how things are going for your students at the West Hills College Lemoore campus, where you are an English instructor.
Well, thank you so much for having me this evening. I really appreciate the opportunity to get the word out and, communicate what's going on in the city. And out at West Hills College, I'm teaching 1A courses. Those are my favorite courses to teach because I get to explore a little bit higher level of thinking with students who are ready to become scholars. And in my class, more than just learning grammar and punctuation, by the time you start 1A, you get to explore issues of identity, what is sexism, what is racism, what are all these different systems that we talk about.
Wow.
I'm helping create that foundation for scholars, and I love the work that I do and discussing that with others.
Sounds like critical thinking and writing.
Right. Well, there's this assumed knowledge that scholars learn. So by the time you get to graduate school, you should have a certain vocabulary or a certain understanding of ideas and themes.
Yeah.
And so laying that foundation, that's sort of the class that I teach. That's my specialty. I work on sort of that foundation of that assumed knowledge that scholars learn in college.
Well, that that sounds like that's a skill set that transfers in an interesting way to your role as a city council member.
Absolutely, and one of the reasons why I'm so confident in the arguments that I make. When we talk about experts in the field, most people, when they think of, oh, you're just a teacher or you're just an English teacher, and if you've never, I mean, once you've learned your grammar and your punctuation, what do you think we do after, 1 to 15 classes of English? What you're learning to do is, in literary analysis, is research and analysis, looking at all the different systems and learning the language of those systems in order to better communicate, because it's all about effective communication. And that's an issue that I try to use, or a way in which, a vehicle in which to talk about issues as my role as a council person.
Well, yeah, full disclosure, I was an English major in college too, so that's my degree, and I couldn't agree with you more on the value gained by trying to speak, as I'm fumbling now, but structure a logical argument, base it on research. It's not just all abstraction. You give it reference. And people at city governments don't always want that kind of oversight. They're, I think, used to rubber stamp city councils who really are there to be there and aren't really pushing the envelope or holding people accountable. I'm trying to frame it. You frame it for us, Holly. When last we spoke, they were talking about a code of conduct for you. And then you've probably been through an election, I believe, and maybe you or the mayor. Tell us, you want to start there, or what's the best place to begin this?
No, I'm most definitely not the mayor. I'm still censured. Actually.
No, I'm sorry. I meant to say there was a mayoral election. But
oh yes, well no, we actually are, unlike Fresno, we are not mayor strong. It's a 5 council, but we all have just 1 vote. The meetings are just simply agendized and set by the mayor, but the council is, it's an equal proportional vote, and it's not a separate district or anything.
I'm sorry. Are you elected at large citywide, or do you have different districts?
We've just moved to districts. This was actually the first election we've held by district.
Wow.
So I was actually elected at large.
Wow.
But the next election I'll be in a district election. So this was the first round of district elections. And at the time that they set the code of conduct, it was extremely sexist and demeaning. And I tried to bite my tongue because I didn't want to cause the city extra grief and extra scrutiny over these like petty little differences in politics. I'm a big girl. I can handle myself. I can prove these guys, look ridiculous.
Yeah.
But as the process wore on, it became more than that. It became these bogus investigations into, at one point, the chief of police accused me of ageism because I tweeted out good old boy network, which is an idiom.
Wow.
And I was saddened to see that he didn't know what an idiom was, let alone yelled at me in his office for daring to use the hashtag feminism. He thought it was a bad word or would somehow cause some sort of liability to the city by talking about sexism and feminism and using those terms, let alone that I teach that at the college. So that was a ridiculous investigation. I cannot believe taxpayer money was used to investigate me over the censure was created just as a way to have the city taxpayer money abused.
Holly, I'm sorry
to go after me.
Holly, I'm sorry to interrupt. Are you maybe moving around right now? We're getting a kind of up and down in the volume. Like maybe the signal is changing on your phone in reaching us?
Yeah, actually, let me move to a different location. Yeah.
Well, just one location.
Is it better?
Anyone is fine as long as you stay there.
Okay. I'll stay right here. I was walking around. So the biggest issue is, I bring to the forefront issues like systematic issues of racism and sexism that I witness, and I am trying to bring to the forefront of where we can better address these issues in our city and make things more equitable. And I sometimes think that I maybe am bringing up issues that are a little over their heads a little in some instances, or they don't seem to connect, or it doesn't resonate with them where the problem lies because they don't want to admit that it's them. And as this has gone on, and the more ridiculous their arguments are made to look, they created a way in which to kind of attack me in a way to try and get me to resign and tried to recall me. And it was to basically use taxpayer money to investigate me and try to drum up a lawsuit. And so this is what they're doing. They're actually trying actively to drum up a lawsuit based on bogus stuff just to try and knock me out of politics because they don't like what I have to say or what I represent or what I'm saying, how I represent people that are in poverty and trying to raise social equality issues. So instead of trying to address it as based on merit, the chief of police accused me of ageism based on an idiom. the Commander Ochoa, the second in command, accused me of threatening her because I tweeted out an Amazon review of a pen that can also double as something that will break a window in case of an emergency. Behind the scenes, they try to keep it under closed session, saying, "Oh, the council person's under investigation." So you'd think it's like really terrible, but these are drummed up charges based mainly just to knock out a potential political opponent, because the chief of police ran for county supervisor in my supervisial district that I had previously run in before running in city council and winning. So he knows that we are potential political adversaries. He uses his position as chief of police, is soon-to-be brother-in-laws with the city manager, who is the oversight for that. And the city manager is okaying this and is okaying investigating me on drummed-up charges that they know are just complete BS.
Holly,
using taxpayer money to do it.
Take me back to when you first ran for office and why.
So in 2014, I ran for county supervisor, largely based on the closure of the last health clinic that the county was helping fund here in Kings County. A lot of issue with that was not only that we have, it's hard to find doctors, but the access to those doctors, the buildings in which they're housed, is often very difficult, and that was a place in which a lot of very low-income women and children were going for services, and it was very disappointing because it hurt the poorest among us. And then they transformed that facility into, it still remained as a clinic, but it was only for county employees and their families.
Wow.
As a benefit to their health. But so they took a benefit, but they cut out all of the poorest among everyone, and it was awful and heartbreaking to see. So I deeply opposed that. I ran in my district against one of the gentlemen who voted for that, Doug Verboon, and so I lost pretty badly, actually. But that was my first run, and when I was out, I got to hear a lot of other issues in my city that were wrong. That I was just sort of didn't realize how much still needed to be fixed just locally right in my own backyard. So I ran again, and in 2016 won then. So I ran in the county supervisor in 2014. I ran for city council in 2016. Well, I ran in 2014 actually for city council at first, but I kind of knew I would lose. I just wanted to keep going out there and talking to people and try my best.
Sure.
Even if I lost, I just wanted to really try and show people that it's not true that you have to fit a certain box, or you have to look a certain way or have a certain name, or, if you talk about issues that the community is telling you about when you're walking door to door and you bring that to the forefront, people will support you. And so it doesn't matter everything else,
Yeah.
And so
to your point, you said you were elected citywide in Lemoore.
Yes, actually it was at large at the time. So yes, I won. And so I actually got more votes than both of the new council members combined in my election. And so I'm pretty confident in the support that I have.
Just to remind folks, you're listening to Climate Politics on KFCF. We're speaking with Lemoore City Councilmember Holly Andrade Blair, and as she just described, Holly, you joined the City Council in 2016. That's not very long ago. You discovered what was the most surprising thing or pressing issue or thing you didn't expect you find? How would you describe your introduction to city council?
Well, at first it was amicable, as long as I got along and I went along and got along with everything and everybody. But, I started really questioning the need for a sales tax, for example, that I felt was regressive, that would hurt the poorest among us. I started to question why the city manager, who owns part of a construction company, why did he give bids to certain people? I wanted to know the relationship between him and some of our developers, because it seemed like a lot of change orders were coming in where they would get the bid, but then they'd have all these extra things that need to be purchased after a while. And after you were said and done, it actually would end up being more than you ever anticipated. I was really concerned when I started getting pulled over more often than normal, when I refused to vote for the chief of police's brother-in-law or future brother-in-law to be their city manager, because I felt like that was already poor oversight. I started to question why, when we needed a mid-year adjustment in revenue, we had like a bit of a revenue shortage. The account that we needed revenue from, we were tying to an account that went to traffic tickets. And that account had been declining for the last 3 years. So it seemed odd that we would want to pull revenue from that kind of source. So I questioned any oversight that we wouldn't see a bump in traffic tickets, like we saw in Ferguson, for example, where it became really the poorest among us were getting dinged with ticket after ticket to just hide the fact that we didn't have money in our budget, and this is where we're going to pull from like the poorest among us again.
I'm sorry. So
I started to really question
Holly,
those policies.
Yeah. Are you saying then that what you thought you were spotting there was a plan that was being made to increase that revenue, that we're going to be able to meet this goal?
I'm saying that there are a lot of areas where taxpayer money is foolishly wasted, and I can't tell if it's because of some nefarious reason or just simply incompetence. But either way, taxpayer money is being wasted.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to help be a watchdog for that, because that was one of the most pressing issues I heard from the community. Not to mention, as soon as I mentioned some of these discrepancies and sort of the inherent bias between the oversight either being none at all, self-checking, or having assembly members being the oversight, I really questioned the integrity of that. And in doing so, I sort of had all these sort of drummed up charges brought against me every time in order to try to publicly shame me or mock me or try to bully me into resigning. And I'm just not taking it anymore. I'm like, no, the people voted for me to be here. I'm rightfully here, and I'm going to voice their concerns whether they like it or not. Maybe there needs to be some big boys and actually argue on merit rather than on just personal, I just don't like you, you make me feel icky kind of. That's BS.
It sounds like you're trying to have a policy discussion and a budget discussion, and then you are also trying to provide transparency and oversight, which is your primary responsibility.
Absolutely. I asked, in fact, I have such a poor relationship with our city manager. I don't believe anything he says. I asked that we have our weekly meetings. I want to be able to record them all. I have no problem with the community seeing or hearing our meetings. They're meant to be where the public knows what's going on. He refuses to be recorded. And I'm like, you know what? Because you don't want people to see how you lie to me. You don't want people to see how you lead people on, or you tell them flat out falsehoods. You don't carry out the things that they say they want. Like when I say I want to see, for example, we cut down a beautiful a bunch of trees downtown, beautiful, and there were several trees more cut down than initially told needed to be cut down. I didn't believe that all of those trees were actually sick. I wanted to know what the plan moving forward was to replace some of those trees, and from the very start they said, okay, we'll get it to you. Never ever got it. I asked the chief of police from the very beginning. I wanted to see some of the new reports on domestic violence and abuse, particularly when it comes to rape and sexual abuse, because there have been some changes in the standard of how those were reported. And I know that there's been a lot of work in the DA's office to actually improve the response, and the detective work that's being done there it's such a huge change from before. I kind of wanted to see if Lemoore was following suit, because I really appreciated what was going on as far as there was more of a look into these abuse cases, and I never got that report like I asked. And so there was a number of instances where it didn't matter what I said, it didn't matter what I requested, it was a joke. You know, they would have the council members line up and decide a development before I even was in the room. I was not invited into those meetings, or it would be already said and done. They already knew what votes they'd have, and then they just like, well, now you can meet with the developer. Now you can ask your questions. But it was like I was systematically kept out of meetings routinely, and I'm trying to bring that to the attention of, and, you know.
What kind of meetings are you talking about being kept out of?
Well, for example, I have said over and over again that I thought one of the biggest failings of our council recently was there was no look at requesting that the developer put in a traffic signal. I know that we're not going to meet the warrant for the traffic for the state of California to come in and purchase a big traffic signal for us, where we have a very busy intersection and they want to develop even more there. And there was this 3-phase plan, and I wanted to demand that the developer put in a stop sign. It's something that the community desperately wants. It's near a school.
Yeah.
It's busy as it is. The community has this huge outcry. They want a traffic signal there. And if we're going to develop there, I wanted to have the developer pay for that.
Sure.
Or at least, that could be negotiated in.
It's an impact fee.
It was completely ignored.
Wow. So is it the basic dynamic that we see in so many cities, certainly here, that developers dominate the city council's agenda?
Absolutely. When I first got onto the council, they had given a raise to the previous city manager, the old council. Then I get in, and then the city manager is gone. And I don't want to get into too much because I don't want to get into trouble saying anything I shouldn't. So
Personnel
I'm just going to
stuff.
cut to the chase and say the chief of police became our acting city manager in the interim before we got our current city manager, who's, like I said, soon to be his brother-in-law. But while he was acting, he told me that he was friends with the developer that's now developing here, that they were friends, they were buddies.
Yeah.
And so I really question the relationship that not only, for one, the chief of police, and two, our city manager have with developers and with this construction company that our city manager owns he said at one time we were on the dais, he said he had 6 houses. I did not know that, but in one of our conversations one of the meetings that we had, I think it was during when we were talking about the sales tax they were proposing, that came up. And I thought maybe I misheard, but I really want clarification. How is it that how is it that we're giving out these contracts? Are these people that you know? What are these relationships like? Why do we need so many change orders?
Yep.
Why is it that the city manager can cut checks up to like $50,000 before they come to city council? I mean, this is just lack of oversight of our taxpayer money everywhere.
So, Holly, one of the typical attempts at what would you say, diminishing somebody who speaks up like you is to say, another out-of-towner, another person moving into our community and, telling us how to live our lives. How do you respond to them?
Well, first of all,
because I know you're not that.
Longer than theirs.
Right.
I mean, my family roots go so deep. Yeah. I know that my great-great-grandparents, I know the ones that came from Italy on my mom's side. I know from my father's side, they were indigenous, and then in Tejano, and actually fought in the Mexican-American War on the Tejano side. And one of my relatives is actually, he was in the siege of Bexar and was listed. And so I know my family and the service they've had for this country all the way back to, we're talking, what is that, 1500s something? And so I know that I have deep roots. And then here in the Valley, my mom's from here, my grandmother's from here, my great-grandparents are from Fresno counties and Kern counties. I have family up and down the Valley. Yep. I am, as much as this Valley, my family's blood, sweat, and tears are in our soil.
Yep.
More than anybody can say.
And bones, too. Yeah, that's a very, very deep heritage. I said blood, sweat, and tears, and bones. People buried here for generations. And
absolutely. My grandparents, my grandfather is actually buried out at the Kalinga Cemetery. And my grandmother is buried out here in Kings County. And so it's like I have, she's not buried. I'm sorry, she was cremated. Her ashes are here. But I have family and community. I mean, the roots that I have here are so much more than just, like blood relatives, right? I create family in different communities that I go because I will go in the communities that my other council members won't go into. Mm-hmm. They don't want to go walk the streets of, I grew up in Avenel. I'll go walk out there. And I'll tell all my Avenel peeps, I grew up on Merced Street. I'll go walk on Dome Street any day of the week. I feel safe in Avenel. I feel fine in Avenel. Yeah. You know where I don't feel safe? In some parts of Lemoore. And it's not because of crime. Okay.
No, I know the demographic. I've been involved in any number of sort of campaigns that young people of color come back from certain neighborhoods and say, "You don't send me there again." We saw it here in our Parks Tax initiative here in the fall. There are some very racist people in our communities, and they make no bones about what they think about people of color.
Well, I've had the police called on me. They were unabashed in doing so. In fact, they were bragging about it on a Facebook thread at one point.
I'm sorry, the police were bragging about it?
No, citizens.
Sorry, they called the police because you were doing what?
Canvassing, asking people to vote, and telling people that they have a right to vote, and letting them know where their polling place was.
And
I had the police called on me.
And did the police come?
Yes.
And how do you do in that situation?
When I questioned why was the answer of why the police was called was because they had seen cobwebs on the car in the driveway, so they were worried about the owner and asked for a wellness check. So the police were there for a wellness check. Here's the thing. I don't blame the police for that. Yeah. They don't know what's going on. They're just responding to a call, as they should.
Sure.
What I question is that we have a community in which people weaponize the police because they feel uncomfortable when certain people walk in their neighborhood.
Yeah, customer service for white people, they call it. Sorry, customer service.
This is where leadership begins, right? This is where we set the tone as leaders and say, look, we know this issue exists. Mm-hmm. We want to help address this. Because right now, I don't know if you saw in the news, we had 2 police officers killed in the last 2 days in this country. Oh, and it is it's terrible for those families. Anybody who's killed, that's horrible.
Of course.
But when you have people weaponizing the police, inevitably there's fear in communities. And what this does is it puts those communities of color in danger, but it also puts police officers more in danger. They're more likely to be seen as a threat, so much so that they would be also targets So until we start talking about these issues as adults and say we really want to get to the heart of this and change the society we live in for the better, we're going to see more and more of this. And that breaks my heart because I have 4 other members on that council who say they want to do the right thing. But when the time comes, they continue to keep me censured so that the taxpayer money can be used to go after me on a political beef. They're drumming up lawsuits with our own city against itself. They're creating that way the city can sue me. So the city is actually creating lawsuits in order to go after electeds who want to help create oversight to help protect all those officers out there, because it's not the young guys, it's not the newbies that are at fault here, guys. It's the system. It's at the top, the structure. That's who sets the tone. And so I really question when the chief of police and the commander right below him can drum up false charges against someone and there be no investigation, outside investigation. The oversight for that is his family, his future brother-in-law.
I'm just going to remind listeners, you're listening to Climate Politics. Our guest is Holly Andrade Blair. She is a city council member in Lemoore, elected there in 2016, and she has been running into a whole slew of efforts to intimidate her as she seeks to bring transparency to local government and raising the social justice issues that are critical to a healthy community and to justice and equity. And it's a tremendous lift that one has to take on, Holly. We're moving into our final 3 or 4 minutes here, and I just wanted to give you the opportunity to steer the conversation. I mean, as we move toward a wrap-up here, maybe tell us whatever you'd like to tell us. Take it away.
Well, I would just say, don't ever let anybody say hitting that share button doesn't help. You can empower the entire community by simply sharing, by getting the information out there, because there's no outside force going to come in and investigate, no matter how much it sounds terrible. This is not CIS, New York, or whatever, right, or NCIS. This is real life. Real life means that nobody cares about the least among us, right? Until you make them care. And you make them care by sharing and having the community outcry. When enough voices are raised, that's when more news sources will be picked up. That's when you can have an actual investigation take place.
I'm sorry, so you're talking about Facebook?
Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat. You helping text messaging people. When you share stories and you share this information, like this show, for example, you're self-empowering your community, because you are becoming one of the many for the foundation of our government. You are helping hold people accountable. The more people in that foundation, the better. It's like grains of sand. And it just seems like a simple click, and people make fun of it. But it's so powerful. In one instance, you are helping empower your very own community.
You're experiencing this directly, Holly?
Yes. I'm telling you, that makes a difference, because
I'm sorry.
I'm voices out there now.
I should ask more directly. I'm friends with you on Facebook, and I see there's a lot of debate there. They really come after you, don't they?
Absolutely, they come after me. But when I have a lot of people who come and chime in, so it's not just me against 40 trolls. Yes. It really makes a difference. It really does.
Yeah, and so with newspapers, of course, in communities aren't what they once were and can't be again, and we have to create our own news in many ways, at least to get the word out, as you said.
That's how you empower yourself. Yep. There's no Superman going to come in and save us, okay, guys? If you really want change in this community, you have to start sharing the news. You need to start paying attention, speaking up, sending emails. You don't even have to leave your house anymore. You can get it online. There's really no excuse to not be involved. But there's nobody going to come in and save us. We have to do it ourselves. I'm starting here by being in this system and being a voice. I can't stand alone. I need everyone else to participate. If you want to help, you want something to be done and changed, don't rely on somebody else to do it. Click the share button. Get the news out.
And Holly,
raising your voice.
Wonderful. And tell me, in the upcoming round of elections by district, do you think there's an opportunity here to see some change like that?
Absolutely. I will let everybody know. My plan is running a slate. I have a whole plan ready to go. You need to count to 3. If I'm not going to get that now, I'll have it by 2020. I'm not worried about that at all. I'm more concerned about the here and now. It's not about political office. What do I do in the next 2 years? I can't work with these guys, right? Make them listen. If they aren't going to listen to me, start emailing them, start telling them, start sharing with your friends what's going on. Ask them about where's the money going.
Holly?
Start asking them why was somebody fired recently. You know, start asking those questions. Shame them into working for the community.
I'm on the same page. Thank you so much for joining us again, and it's been a real treat checking in with you, and we hope to do so again at a future date.
Thank you so much for allowing me to have this conversation.
Oh,
have
no,
a great evening.
It's our honor. You have a good evening, too. We'll talk to you again. Bye-bye now.
Okay, bye.
You've been listening to Climate Politics. I'm Kevin Hall. At the controls is Joey Hall, and providing backup to the whole operation is Dennis Thompson. Our theme music is by Keela. This is KFCF 88.1 in Fresno. We're on the air every second and fourth Friday of the month from 5 to 6 p.m. Please join us next time, and in the meantime, use less stuff. Thank you.